April 16th, 1945. The air above the Ruhr Valley trembles with the heavy drone of piston engines. Flight Lieutenant Roland Prosper Beamont, known simply as B to his squadron, sits strapped into the cockpit of his Hawker Tempest Mark V. His hands are steady on the flight controls as he ascends through the dense cloud cover at 8,000 feet. Inside the cockpit, the heavy scent of high-octane aviation fuel mingles with the metallic tang of freezing air slipping through the canopy seal. Below him, the fractured landscape of Western Germany sprawls out like a shattered mosaic. He sees cratered airfields, hollowed-out factories, and rivers choked with the detritus of a collapsing empire. The war is in its final weeks, yet the skies remain a deadly theater. Somewhere in that gray void, the Luftwaffe's last desperate gamble is on the prowl. The Messerschmitt Me, 262. It is the world's first operational jet fighter, a machine so fast it seems to mock the physical laws governing propeller-driven aircraft. Beamont's squadron has been thoroughly briefed on the 262. By now, every Allied pilot knows the reports. Sleek, twin-engined, and capable of speeds exceeding 540 miles per hour, the jet is nearly 100 miles per hour faster than the Tempest and 150 faster than the venerable Spitfire. They materialize from nowhere, diving from altitude like silver bolts, their 30mm cannons tearing through bomber formations before vanishing back into the cloud bank. American crews call them blowjobs for the way they simply blow past fighter escorts. British pilots use darker names. Some claim that shooting down a 262 is like trying to swat a hornet with a hammer. It requires luck, timing, and an ability that most pilots lack predicting where the jet will be before it actually arrives. But Beamont possesses something else. It is a modification his fellow pilots laughed at, a contraption the ground crews labeled childish when he first revealed it. Taped to the inside of his windscreen, sitting just above the standard Mark II gyroscopic gunsight, is a crude arrangement of wire and colored beads. It is a homemade deflection sight, fashioned by Beamont himself, using materials scavenged from a downed German aircraft and a broken wristwatch. It resembles a child's art project, an embarrassment sitting in the cockpit of one of the RAF's most sophisticated fighters. When he first installed it 3 weeks prior, his wingman asked if he had lost his mind. The squadron leader merely shook his head and walked away. Yet, in the 5 days that are about to unfold, that ridiculous tangle of wire and glass will help Beamont achieve the impossible. 7 confirmed kills against the Me 262, the Luftwaffe's untouchable ghost. To comprehend Beamont's achievement, one must first understand the adversary he faces. The Me 262 is not merely a faster aircraft. It represents a paradigm shift in aerial warfare. Designed by Willy Messerschmitt and powered by twin Junkers, Jumo 004 turbojet engines, the 262 entered operational service in mid-1944, nearly a full year before any Allied jet would see combat. Its performance is staggering. While a Tempest might reach 435 miles per hour in level flight, the 262 cruises comfortably at 460 and can dash at over 540. More critically, its acceleration and climb rate render traditional fighter tactics obsolete. A pilot can line up a perfect shot, squeeze the trigger, and watch his tracers fall uselessly behind as the jet simply accelerates away. The German high command knew they possessed a war-winning weapon, if only they could build enough of them, train enough pilots to fly them, and keep their airfields intact long enough to launch them. By April 1945, those ifs have become insurmountable obstacles. Allied bombing has crippled German industrial capacity, and fuel shortages have grounded entire wings. The Luftwaffe is scraping the bottom of its manpower barrel, sending up boys with barely 50 hours of flight training to face veterans with thousands of hours of combat experience. However, the 262 itself remains lethal. Jagdverband 44, the elite jet unit commanded by the legendary Adolf Galland, is still operational and dangerous. These are not green recruits. These are the survivors. The aces, men who fought from the Battle of Britain to the Eastern Front and are now making their last stand over a dying Reich. They fly the 262 with the desperate brilliance of men fighting not for victory, but for time, for honor, and for the slim hope that history might remember they fought well. Against this threat, the RAF throws everything it has. Tempests, Spitfires, Mustangs, all excellent machines, yet all hopelessly outmatched in straight-line speed. The Allies have adapted their doctrine. Hit the 262 seconds during takeoff and landing when they are slow and vulnerable. Patrol the airfields, catch them on the ground. While some pilots manage kills this way, it feels hollow, like shooting fish in a barrel. In flight, the 262 remains almost untouchable. Almost. Roland Beamont is not a typical fighter pilot. Before the war, he studied engineering at Cambridge, and that analytical mind has never left him, even amidst the chaos of combat. He approaches aerial warfare the way a mathematician approaches a complex equation. Break it down, identify the variables, and solve for X. The problem with the Me 262 was simple. The gunsights available to Allied pilots in 1945 were designed for engaging aircraft that flew at similar speeds. The Mark II gyroscopic sight in the Tempest was a marvel of engineering, automatically calculating deflection based on target range and closure rate. However, it assumed the target was not accelerating at jet engine rates. It assumed a relatively predictable flight path. The 262 did neither. Beamont had been obsessing over this problem for weeks. He studied gun camera footage from pilots who had engaged the jets. He analyzed the geometry of deflection, shooting the art of firing, not at where the target is, but where it will be when the bullets arrive. For a conventional fighter, this is a matter of degrees. For a jet, it is a matter of radically increased lead angle. The standard sight couldn't calculate it fast enough, and the human brain, drowning in adrenaline and G-forces, couldn't reliably estimate it. So, he built his own solution, using wire salvaged from a German aircraft's elevator control cables, glass beads from a broken rosary found in a French church, and tiny gears from a damaged watch. Beamont constructed what was essentially a secondary reference sight. It wasn't sophisticated. It performed no calculations. It was simply a visual reference tool, a way to train his eye to judge the extreme deflection angles required to hit a target moving 100 miles per hour faster than himself. The colored beads marked specific angles. The wireframe provided spatial reference points. It was crude, absurd looking, and entirely unscientific. But it was effective in ways the official gunsight wasn't, because it forced him to think three-dimensionally, to visualize the geometry of interception, in a way the gyroscopic sight's neat, illuminated reticle could not convey. The other pilots laughed. The ground crew thought the strain had finally broken him. Even his own wingmen rolled their eyes. Only Beamont knew that the mockery didn't matter. Only results mattered. On April 16th, he gets his chance to prove it. The Tempest shudders as Beamont pushes the throttle forward, the Napier Sabre engine's 24 cylinders howling in response. His section, 4 aircraft flying in a loose finger 4 formation, has been vectored toward a reported sighting near Rhine Airfield, a known 262 base. Intelligence suggests JV-44 is operating from there, which means if they find jets, they will be flown by experts. At 12,000 feet, Beamont spots them. Two silver shapes climbing steeply to the north, contrails streaming behind them like chalk lines drawn across the gray canvas of the clouds. Me, 262 seconds. Even at this distance, the silhouette is unmistakable. Swept wings and twin engines slung beneath the predatory sleekness of a shark. Beamont keys his radio. Tally-ho, two bandits, 11 o'clock high, climbing. The Tempests bank hard left, diving to build speed. The two Me, 262 seconds, surely see them, yet they continue their climb. Why run? They're faster. They can dictate the engagement. They believe they are invincible. Except Beamont isn't trying to chase them. He is calculating. The lead 262 is in a steady climb. Not yet at full throttle, still accelerating. He notes the angle, the rate of climb, the closure speed. As his Tempest dives, his mind runs through the geometry automatically now. Muscle memory built from hours of practice with his improvised sight. He ignores the standard gun sight entirely, his eyes flicking between the homemade wireframe and the rapidly closing target. The German pilot makes his first mistake. He assumes the Tempest will try to follow him up, burning energy in a futile climb. Instead, Beamont cuts inside the German's turn, using gravity and his dive speed to position himself not behind the jet, but ahead of where it will be in 3 seconds. The wire beads align with a point in the empty sky, 40 degrees ahead of the Me 262's nose. Beamont's finger tightens on the trigger. The Tempest's 4 20mm Hispano cannons roar, sending 120 rounds per second into a precise column of airspace that does not yet contain an enemy aircraft. Then it does. The Me 262 flies directly into the cone of fire. Cannon shells stitch across the left engine nacelle. White smoke erupts, followed by orange flame. The jet rolls inverted, whether from pilot input or control damage. Beamont cannot tell, and begins an uncontrolled spiral toward the ground. He doesn't watch it crash. He is already turning, searching for the second jet. But the second 262 is gone, vanished into the clouds, its pilot having witnessed something that should not have been possible. A piston engine fighter not just hitting a jet, but predicting its flight path with such precision that evasion was impossible. Beamont's wingman's voice crackles over the radio. "Christ, B, how did you?" Beamont cuts him off. "Form up. They'll be back." He was right. Over the next 5 days, the pattern repeats with the mechanical inevitability of clockwork. The Me 262 seconds rise to intercept Allied bombers. Beamont's section intercepts the interceptors, and each time, that absurd tangle of wire and beads gives him the split-second edge he needs. April 17th. 2 more 262 Sekunde destroyed over Münster. April 18th. 1 damaged, forced to crash land. April 19th. A single kill, but the gun camera footage is so clear that RAF analysts will study it for weeks, trying to understand how he managed a deflection shot at nearly 90 degrees. April 20th. 2 more. A pair of JV-44 jets are caught during a climbing turn, both disintegrating under cannon fire before their pilots can react. 7 confirmed kills in 5 days. 7. Me, 262 seconds, the Luftwaffe's wonder weapon, the jet that was supposed to turn the tide shot down by a pilot using a gunsight that looked like it had been assembled by a distracted child during arts and crafts hour. The other pilots stopped laughing. What they witnessed in those 5 days was something that transcended mechanical advantage. It was something the Germans had believed their superior technology would render irrelevant. the power of human adaptability. It was the refusal to accept that better engineering meant inevitable victory. The Me 262 was faster, yes, more advanced, certainly, but it was flown by men who had been taught a doctrine of aerial combat that no longer applied, who had been trained in tactics designed for a different kind of war. Beamont, with his scavenged wires and watchmaker's precision, represented something the Nazi regime had never understood: that true technological superiority isn't about building the best machine. It is about building the best system for humans to use machines effectively. The wire and beads weren't magic. They were simply a tool that extended his natural capabilities, translating abstract geometry into something his hands and eyes could process faster than conscious thought. In a way, it was the perfect metaphor for the difference between the Allied and Axis approaches to warfare. The Germans built the 262 inches isolation, a masterpiece of engineering that demanded superhuman skill to employ effectively. The Allies built systems, integrated radar networks, mass-produced aircraft with standardized parts, training programs that turned average men into competent pilots, and a culture that encouraged improvisation and field modifications. Beamont's homemade sight was never officially adopted. The RAF never manufactured it, never issued it to other squadrons. By the time analysts finished studying it, the war was over, and jet versus jet combat had rendered the whole question moot. But in those 5 April days, it represented something more important than any official doctrine: the principle that soldiers closest to the problem often understand the solution better than headquarters. It proved that a pilot with wire and intuition could defeat an engineer's masterpiece. It proved that war is ultimately won not by those with the best technology, but by those who adapt fastest. There is a photograph taken in late April 1945 of Beamont standing beside his Tempest. If you look closely at the cockpit canopy, you can just barely see it, that tangle of wire and colored glass catching the spring sunlight. In his flight log, he noted the 7 kills with characteristic British understatement. Engaged several, Me 260, 2 aircraft, satisfactory results. Satisfactory results. 7 victories against an enemy that was supposed to be untouchable. 7 small triumphs in the dying days of a terrible war. 7 moments when a childish-looking modification proved that human ingenuity, not technological superiority, remains the ultimate weapon. The Me 262 was a better aircraft than the Tempest in almost every measurable way. It was faster, more advanced, and more heavily armed. It represented the future of aviation, but it lost because it was wielded by a regime that had forgotten the most basic truth of warfare: that wars are won not by machines, but by the men who use them, and by the cultures that empower those men to think, adapt, and improvise. In the end, Beamont's wire and beads shot down more than 7 aircraft. They shot down the myth of inevitable technological dominance. They proved that a free mind, given the tools and the trust to solve problems creatively, will always find a way through, even if that way looks, to those who don't understand, like a child's toy taped to a windscreen. The jets fell. The wire remained.